DeAndre Hopkins is on the move. EJ, we got a lot to talk about on this one.
Yes, we do. We got our first best ball in 15 together. Let's get at it. This is The Climb.
All right, here we go. Hopping in a Poodle 2 draft. And it finally happened. EJ, we complained up a storm about it in our last episode.
Mm-hmm.
And mercifully, we've finally gotten a 101.
And ironically, it's funny because I had a draft yesterday where I got my first 101 of the year. And then the first best ball in 15 we're doing together, we also got the 101. So it's just kind of ironic that it all just took a little bit of presenting it to the world to let it happen.
Apparently. But yeah, so this will be a bit different for me since I haven't dealt with Minnesota much in these drafts.
And I've probably been too high on a lot of Minnesota pieces, but that's okay.
So yeah, main difference with Poodle 2 compared to Poodle 1 is the playout structure is a bit steeper. It's closer to a puppy contest. It's not quite as difficult, but 2 out of 12 in week 15, 1 out of 10 in week 16, still 134 teams in the final.
So yeah, I kind of like this better in a sense. A lot of ways I like it, a lot of ways I don't. Just a little bit different than normal.
Yeah, so by the time we came up for the 2-3 turn here, the wide receivers had dried up pretty well. So we kind of talked about maybe doing Hurts, but Devonta Smith was already gone. So double tapping the running back here was a pretty obvious choice.
Yeah, we touched on T. Higgins as a maybe as well, but yeah, ultimately we decided that we want to go running back, and kind of not have the big worry on that.
Yeah, so as far as the DeAndre Hopkins post-trade, how are you feeling about him? Where do you think he ends up, and where are you taking him in drafts right now?
Yeah, so I think his ADP falls a little bit, obviously, with uncertainty since we have so many people that need wide receivers, but there's a lot of good places he could land. Detroit being probably the best one in my eyes. Buffalo's another one where I think he'd be okay. I don't think he'd be as good as Detroit by a lot of standards, but I don't know. Where are you thinking?
Yeah, the three that stood out to me are Chiefs, Buffalo, Detroit, and I think those are all good spots for D-Hop, but they could hurt some of the other, like the Bills or Chiefs wide receivers that we've been drafting could be hurt there. So we had Fields fall to us here, which feels like a pretty unique start, but then kind of messy for our second pick. We ended up going Christian Kirk, considered TJ Hawkinson, but if we would have gone, basically we would have had one wide receiver through 5 rounds if we didn't take Christian Kirk here, and that felt like it was going to be too hard to recover from.
Yeah, we were kind of hoping that London was going to fall to us there so we could go Fields, London, and already have that built-in game stack right off the bat, but fortunately came off at 45.
Yeah. Circling back to the D-Hop stuff, I do think one plausible location that would be bad for him is New England. That just feels gross. How do you feel about some of the Cardinals guys now that he's gone?
We've kind of talked about Hollywood obviously going up in value, going about the range you see on board right now, kind of around Mike Evans, JSN, Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett's bad value right here. I think he's going a little bit later than that. Not the point, but just kind of around that 65 pick range is where we kind of expect it. I'm not really huge on taking him there, but Rondale Moore, I'll take more flyers on going forward for sure.
Yeah, and so we continue to try and catch up at receiver in this draft, double tapping Deontay Johnson and Treylon Burks. We were considering going Marquise Brown, Dallas Goedert if the board fell that way, but Hollywood came off the board 1 pick before us. So
yeah, that one was unfortunate because I would, like I said, would have had a built-in game stack, but potentially the one target now in Arizona. I'm not sure what's going on in Arizona now.
I'm worried, man. Our last episode, I was talking through the Kyler play, and now I'm pretty scared about it.
Yeah, Kyler probably is someone I'm going to refrain from really taking at all anymore.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think there's a very real possibility now that the Cardinals are pretty clearly in full tank mode. They're not going to rush him back, and I think that he could be completely done as a Cardinal if they get Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, try to get whatever trade value you can out of him and hope for the best.
So we had a pretty tricky spot here on the board. Wide receiver was pretty much wiped out. Considered Anthony Richardson, he would have been a bring back with Jacobs, but we already had Fields, and we knew we were going to have to catch up at wide receiver at some point. So finishing out the running back room here, we had Jacobs, Ramondre, Charbonnet, Javonte Williams, only taking one more running back. And then wide receivers, Jefferson, Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson, Treylon Burks. So felt a little behind at this point at wide receiver, but not too terribly, especially since we only need one more running back now.
All right, yeah, and we were planning on smashing receiver and pretty much the rest of the way out. And well, we can see how that went here shortly. But overall, it was just kind of, it was so much. It's always hard drafting at the turn because you have to predict so far ahead where your picks are going to be when it comes around. We were looking at Mooney here big time. He came off right before us there, and we were also looking at Freiermuth. And we ended up going Mingo and Gibson here. So we grabbed Gibson, and then that way we didn't have to think about running back and moved on from there.
This running back room is probably one of the better ones I've drafted because I usually try to push it at running back. But, man, having Javonte Williams as RB4 on a team feels pretty nice. It's just a question of if the wide receiver room we built on this lineup is going to be good enough.
And I've been really in on Gibson recently. I just think that he's going to be a stabilizing player on like down weeks. I think he's going to catch enough passes, and as if Brian Robinson got hurt, he'll have a lot of upside too. So
yeah,
I feel like we can say that about any running back at this point, but just a little more structured.
And so at this point, we did not have a tight end on the team, so we were really hoping to get Cole Kmet here. I think that one it lined up in terms of value, and it made sense with having Fields. And so naturally, he goes off the board.
Exactly.
One pick before us. So Nico is a wide receiver who I really like. Obviously, the Houston offense doesn't project that well, but he has a path to being the number one in the offense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of the higher end dart throw. I think there's a little bit more certainty with that. Obviously, you can argue Mechie as the other guy being the one in that offense. But who knows, because he hasn't played yet. So at least Nico Collins has a little bit of familiarity with the team and everything so far.
And we were set up pretty well for quarterback 2 at this point. We had Kenny Pickett, CJ Stroud, or Bryce Young, with Bryce Young being the preferred option since we did have the Carolina double tap at wide receiver. But all three of those guys would fit our lineup, and all three of them were already set up for a Week 17 game stack.
So when we come around on this turn, we were looking real nice. We got both the guys we wanted there. We were looking at tight end. Laporta and Everett were the two we were trying to choose between. We like Laporta better as a whole, I think, just because of his upside being the possible 2 in the offense. And Everett, you're looking at more of like a touchdown upside kind of guy.
Yeah, exactly. And so at this point, our team 2-5-7-1 build. So we knew we were taking at least 2 more tight ends. And then we still didn't have a Fields stack. So we're thinking Chase Claypool late as our final wide receiver to get that stack with Justin Fields.
Otherwise, we were looking at tight ends for the other pick on the turnaround. We're looking Michael Mayer. We talked about Musgrave from Green Bay to give that Minnesota game stack, give something, since we didn't have any correlation yet at that point.
Yeah, Dawson Knox was another guy we were interested in, but he came off the board earlier in the 16th round. So we grabbed Michael Mayer, who once again falls past ADP. I know we've talked at length how we like him. We contemplated Trey McBride, ultimately went with Musgrave to get some kind of bring back there for Justin Jefferson in Week 17. Not the strongest correlation, but it's something. So that rounded out our tight end room with Laporta, Mayer, and Musgrave. 3 guys late in the draft. Part of the reason we didn't go Claypool there is because he also came off the board in the 16th. So at this point, we're going to have a pretty weak team stack for Justin Fields, but they did draft a rookie, Tyler Scott. I believe he was a day 3 pick out of Cincinnati. There were some people who had a round 2 grade on him, but he's a speed guy. He's somebody who can, take a broken play and get to the house. So it's far from a strong 18th round pick, I think, but does give us some level of stack with Justin Fields.
If he can take 1 for 80, that can be a startable week. So yeah,
exactly.
And there is a lot of uncertainty in that wide receiver room just as a whole. So I think DJ Moore is going to be the main guy, but we really don't know about the twos even at this point. So
yeah. So we'll break this lineup down a little deeper here in just a moment. All right, we got the full lineup here. It was a 2-5-8-3 build. Obviously, with any lineup, it's pretty basic, but you want to have both your quarterbacks stacked. In this case, we technically did. We got a great Panthers stack, but the Chicago stuff is a little thin, but it's there.
It is there. Can't deny that one. So for our quarterbacks game stack for Week 17, obviously we got a whole lot of nothing with Justin Fields, which is unfortunate, but we got quite a bit with Bryce Young there. So feeling okay there.
Yeah, it hurts not getting that Atlanta bring back. Matt Collins, I don't hate him as an 18th round pick, but just given our roster construction and where we were at tight end, it wasn't an option for us.
No, and I think it's better to go ahead and stack a receiver with Fields over taking just a flyer on someone random on a team that probably won't throw to him at all. We're worried about the primary receivers getting passes thrown to them. So,
yeah, I think definitely when push comes to shove, you got to stack your quarterback first before worrying about a bring back. So for roster construction, I gave this one a 3 out of 5. I think we were kind of on the fence between a 3 and a 4. 2-5-8-3 is a perfectly fine build. There's a lot of capital spent at running back in this one, and I do think it hurt the other positions, specifically wide receiver and tight end a little bit. So that's kind of where I personally would knock this lineup.
Yeah, I agree completely on that one. It just didn't come out to perfect, but like I said, it's a pretty all right team right across the middle of the board.
Yeah.
ADP value, didn't really get anything too crazy, excluding the Justin Fields. We did reach a little bit on Charbonnet just to complete game stacks, but Charbonnet is a guy I like, so I don't mind reaching on him. Otherwise, everything else is kind of just late in the draft, so I don't really stress too much about reaching or getting values late in the draft.
Yeah, and one thing we noticed during the draft, we were trying to keep an eye out for anything really off the wall that was happening, and this was a pretty by the books room, so there wasn't a lot of ADP value to begin with in this room, and specifically with drafting at the turn, it's just hard to get those kinds of values because you're gonna have to reach on some guys anyway when you're at the turn. But yeah, I think the Fields pick with Justin Jefferson, I think that's going to be a relatively unique pairing, so that gives me some hope for this lineup.
And this is me thinking back just a little bit now. The plus side is Fields is a guy that can go ahead and put up 40 points on his own and not necessarily need his receivers. So it's not the worst thing ever that he's kind of flying solo.
Yep. And I think, too, we got Laporta and Mayer both at a value, and those are 2 guys who we already think are too cheap. So
yes.
I always feel really good about getting them at a value.
Yeah, because realistically, they're in certain pretty similar situations to Dalton Kincaid as a whole. Their quarterbacks obviously a little bit worse on both ends, but they're rookie tight ends with high draft capital, so they hopefully have that upside that can sit around and just balance out this team to give us stable numbers throughout the year.
Yeah, and to kind of put a bow on our DeAndre Hopkins discussions that we've been having, I mean, if he goes to the Bills, you've got a 3 wide receiver set: Diggs, Hopkins, Gabe. You got Dawson Knox still. Like, when is Kincaid ever seeing the field?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's the one thing that has been troubling to me is Knox or Kincaid going to be the starter even?
right.
So,
Yeah, yeah. I think we both agree Kincaid is not a great click right now.
oh,
So finally, some playoff stacks with this one. I think we actually did pretty good getting a lot of skinny stacks built in here. We technically have a full game stack with Bryce and the Panthers guys and Musgrave in week 16, although that's admittedly a pretty weak correlation there. But
yeah.
couple other interesting pairings in each of these weeks here. So I think, man, if we could have just gotten some Fields bringbacks, it would have. I'd feel really good about this lineup, honestly.
I would agree 100%.
And so, yeah, week 17, obviously, we got the Carolina, Jacksonville, a couple other ones there. So,
Yeah.
gave ourselves a chance if we get to week 17. So.
Yes. And I mean,
All right.
that's the hardest part. But yeah, I don't say. I think this team overall is pretty average. Nothing brag home about. But
Yeah, scale of 1 to 10. How would you score this team for yourself?
probably, I mean, we got a lot of players that I like, a lot of higher end player. I would give it probably about a 6 with upside of 8 if things go perfectly, but don't necessarily see that. So I would say probably about, just above average.
Yeah, I think I'm closer to a 4 or a 5, just with not having any crazy values in this one and not getting fields stacked. I think it's perfectly fine. You know, we stuck to good construction for the most part, but yeah,
It just we got a lot of young people on this team too, so that's where the issue comes in. If the young people perform, it could be really, really good versus the opposite, where if they don't perform, then we're kind of we're looking at more of like a 2-3.
yeah, exactly. So before we close it down, make sure you leave a like on this video and give us a subscribe here on the channel as well. And you can be entered to win $25 if you do. So we'll be continuing to do more best ball in 15, as well as some full length draft videos, other weekly episodes. So definitely give us a follow here on YouTube and on Twitter. So any final thoughts on your end, DJ?
Nope. I hope everybody has a happy Memorial Day weekend.
Absolutely. Everybody take care. This has been another episode of The Climb.